Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field, as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives, that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But, in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work, which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. This was Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. In just a few minutes, with fewer than 300 words, he gave meaning to the sacrifice of the fallen. He transformed a battlefield into a symbol of national rebirth. For Lincoln, the Civil War was no longer just a fight to preserve the Union. It had become a struggle to prove that democracy itself could survive. His words continue to resonate because they remind us that freedom, equality, and government, of the people, by the people, for the people, are not guaranteed. They must be defended generation after generation. Washington, D.C., April 14th, 1865. It's been 5 days since General Robert E. Lee, commander of the Confederate Army, surrendered at Appomattox, effectively ending the American Civil War. Newspapers speak of peace, reconstruction, and a new America. But that evening, in a theater in the Capitol, another event unfolds, one that will change history forever. President Abraham Lincoln, accompanied by his wife Mary Todd, is attending a light-hearted play, Our American Cousin. He's relaxed, laughing, applauding. He has no idea this will be the last evening of his life. Backstage, a young man moves silently. He's tall, elegant, well-dressed. His name is John Wilkes Booth. He's 27 years old and one of America's most famous actors, a face everyone knows, a name no one would suspect. Booth is a Confederate sympathizer. He has followed the war's developments with anger. He hates Lincoln, sees him as a tyrant, an enemy of the South. To him, the assassination is not a murder, but a political act, a heroic gesture, a revenge. Booth, the most handsome man in America, walks into the presidential box without being stopped. Different times, of course. He pulls out a pistol and shoots the president in the back of the head. An officer tries to stop him. Booth draws a knife, stabs the officer, and escapes, convinced he's a modern-day Brutus, killing Julius Caesar to save liberty. He'll die 2 weeks later in a shootout with cavalry soldiers who were tracking him down. America wakes up in mourning. Its president, the man who led the country through its darkest years, is dead. Lincoln is the first American president to be assassinated. Sadly, he won't be the last. After him come Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy. His death symbolically closes an era, but opens a wound that will remain for generations. The Civil War, lasting 4 years, caused more than 620,000 deaths, more than American losses in both world wars combined. And it had all started with an election. February 1861. While the North watches with growing concern, the South takes action. Delegates from 7 seceded states meet in Montgomery, Alabama, and establish a new nation, the Confederate States of America. At first glance, the new Constitution looks a lot like the Union's, but with one critical difference: slavery is explicitly protected by law. No longer merely tolerated, it's now a legal right, not just a local matter, but the very foundation of the new state. A president is elected. Jefferson Davis, former U.S. Secretary of War, veteran of the Mexican-American War, senator from Mississippi, stern, reserved, idealistic. He lacks Lincoln's charisma, but he has the support of the planters, the generals, and a population that feels under threat. Meanwhile, the North is paralyzed. Outgoing President James Buchanan declares that secession is illegal, but claims he has no power to stop it. A vacuum of authority lasts for months. Lincoln has not yet taken office. His inauguration is scheduled for March 4th, and when he finally speaks from the steps of the Capitol, his message is twofold: an outstretched hand and a clear warning. He says, "I have no intention to abolish slavery where it already exists, but the Union is indivisible. No state has the right to secede." The message is clear. He won't start a war, but if provoked, he will respond. The provocation comes a month later. In Charleston Harbor, South Carolina, sits Fort Sumter, a federal fort surrounded by Confederate militias. The Union soldiers inside are running low on supplies. Lincoln decides to send a supply ship. No weapons, just food. A symbolic gesture. But for the South, it's too much. On April 12, 1861, at 4:30 a.m., Confederate cannons open fire. For 34 hours, the skies over Charleston fill with smoke and dust. In the end, the garrison surrenders. There are no deaths, but the war has begun. The Union reacts. Lincoln calls for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion. It's a strong move, but a necessary one, and with it, the situation spirals. 4 more southern states join the Confederacy: Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Now, there are 11 rebel states. The Confederate capital is moved to Richmond, Virginia, less than 120 miles from Washington. The North has the population, the industry, the railroads, the Navy. The South has experienced generals, fighting spirit, and the belief that they're fighting for their very survival. This isn't just a war between states. It's a war inside homes, between brothers, fathers, and sons. Robert E. Lee himself, future commander of the Confederate Army, is offered command of the Union forces. He refuses. He opposes secession, but cannot fight against his own Virginia. In Kentucky, a border state, one man joins the Union Army. His brother joins the South. They both die in different battles, wearing the same uniform. Their homes. Even churches split apart. Baptists, Methodists, even Presbyterians divide between North and South. Newspapers divide. Political parties divide. Everything divides. But above all, 2 visions of the future divide. For the South, this is a second American Revolution. Like in 1776, they seek freedom from a tyrannical government. Their documents speak of self-determination, of independence. For the North, it's a war to preserve the Union. Lincoln still hasn't mentioned slavery. The goal is national unity, not yet justice. At least, not yet. Europe is watching with interest. In Britain, Parliament is split. Conservatives sympathize with the South, drawn to its aristocratic image and concerned about the cotton industry. Liberals support the North, Lincoln, and the vision of a world without slavery. But London stays neutral, for a practical reason. Cotton is now coming from India and Egypt. Southern King cotton is no longer indispensable. In France, Napoleon III is watching closely. He has plans for Mexico, and an American war might give him room to maneuver. But he waits too. The South hopes for European intervention, but it never comes. The American Civil War has begun. At first, no one imagines how long it will last. No one foresees the carnage, the destruction, the heartbreak. Many in the North believe it will be brief, that a single campaign will bring the South back into the fold. Many in the South believe the North doesn't have the will to fight. They're all wrong. What begins in April 1861 becomes a total war. A war not only to win, but to redefine America itself. At first, everyone thinks the war will be short. In Washington, the first major battle is treated almost like a public event. It's July 1861. Union troops, young, inexperienced, but enthusiastic, march south toward Richmond, the Confederate capital. Soldiers sing, laugh. Some citizens follow in carriages, bringing picnic baskets and binoculars to watch the Union victory. The battle site will be remembered as First Bull Run or Manassas, depending on which side you're on. And it will be a disaster. Confederate troops, led by skilled generals like Thomas Stonewall Jackson, put up a fierce resistance. At one point, as the Union forces advance, someone shouts, "Look at Jackson, standing there like a stone wall." That's the moment he earns his nickname. It's also the moment everyone realizes this war will be long, brutal, and unpredictable. Union soldiers retreat in chaos. Though outnumbered, the Confederate Army proves more prepared, more motivated. The North is shocked. The myth of Union invincibility is shattered in a single day. After the first defeat, the Union realizes it needs time and manpower. Over the course of the war, more than 2 million men will fight for the North. The South will field about 900,000, but numbers alone don't decide the outcome. This is a modern war in many ways. Railroads move troops. Telegraph lines coordinate fronts. Primitive machine guns are used. Rifled muskets improve accuracy. It's also an industrial war. Factories, steel mills, mines. The North produces weapons, ammunition, uniforms. The South struggles with shortages of supplies, of infrastructure. But in other ways, it's still an old-fashioned war. Tactics are from the 1800s, frontal assaults, open field maneuvers. The cost is paid in human lives. Battles last only hours but leave thousands dead. Ambulances are rudimentary, hospitals improvised. Doctors operate without anesthesia or hygiene. The Civil War becomes a war of amputations. And the soldiers are not professionals. They're farmers, workers, teachers, students, boys of 16, 17. Many write letters home. Today, those letters are among the most valuable windows into the spirit of the time. Some are filled with hope, others with fear, still others with despair. Meanwhile, the war reaches into homes. Families are torn apart. Women take on new roles. They manage farms, work as nurses, organize fundraisers. The modern nurse is born. Clara Barton, for example, who will later found the American Red Cross, begins her work here, treating the wounded in muddy, blood-soaked battlefields. In northern cities, industry reorganizes. Factories pivot to war production. In New York, Boston, Philadelphia, they churn out uniforms, rifles, ammunition. The Union's economy grows. In the South, the war strangles everything. Northern blockades shut down ports. Food prices skyrocket. Hunger spreads. But a deeper shift is brewing beneath the surface. At first, Lincoln insists, "We don't want to end slavery, we just want to save the Union." It's a strategic position. He knows that border states, like Kentucky and Missouri, stay in the Union because he avoids the slavery issue. He knows that many Northerners are not abolitionists. They don't want to compete with freed blacks for jobs. But as months pass, reality changes. Enslaved people begin to flee. Hundreds cross into Union lines every day. They offer to work as laborers, cooks, spies. Some ask to enlist. The presence of escaped slaves becomes a military issue. What to do with them? A Union general proposes, "They're enemy property. We'll treat them as contraband." And he frees them. Gradually, the idea of emancipation takes hold. Lincoln begins to consider a turning point. With the war dragging on, he realizes saving the Union is no longer enough. He needs a moral cause, something that inspires the country, that gives meaning to the sacrifice. And so, the idea is born, of a decree that will change history, the Emancipation Proclamation. But first, he needs a military victory. He can't announce it after a defeat. He must wait. As 1862 wears on, America is weary. Cemeteries grow. Corpses pile up. The front barely shifts. But something in the nation's heart is changing. What began as a war to reunite the Union is becoming a war to remake it. And when the decisive battle finally arrives, Lincoln's message will shake the entire world. It's the summer of 1862. The war has raged for over a year. The death toll is rising. The early enthusiasm has vanished. And Abraham Lincoln is a president under pressure. In the North, Democrats accuse him of being too radical. Progressive Republicans say he's not acting fast enough. His position is fragile, but he has a plan. He wants to free the slaves, not just out of idealism, though that matters, but as a strategic, military, political move. He wants to strike at the heart of the South's economy. He wants to give the war a new moral meaning. He wants to prevent any chance of European support for the Confederacy, but he knows he can't do it after a defeat. He needs a victory, and that victory is coming. In September, Confederate forces under Robert E. Lee invade Maryland, bringing the war into Union territory for the first time. The goal is clear: demoralize the North, gain international recognition, and maybe persuade border states to switch sides. But the Union Army confronts them near Sharpsburg, at a place called Antietam. It becomes the bloodiest day in American history. Over 22,000 dead, wounded, or missing in just one day. Neither side truly wins, but the Confederates retreat. And Lincoln gets what he needs: a tactical victory. A few days later, on September 22, 1862, Lincoln announces that starting January 1, 1863, all slaves living in rebellious states will be declared free. It's not yet total abolition. Slave states that remained in the Union, like Kentucky, are not affected. But the message is unmistakable. It's an act of war, but also a moral choice. Lincoln declares, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would do that. My mission is to save the Union." And with this proclamation, he does both. The world watches. In Europe, public opinion swings decisively toward the North. Pressure on the British government to recognize the Confederacy disappears. Now that the war is about freedom, England, who abolished slavery in 1833, can no longer remain morally neutral. From that moment on, the Confederacy is alone. But the most immediate impact of the proclamation is this: African Americans can now enlist in the Union Army, and they do, by the thousands. By the end of the war, nearly 200,000 black men will have fought for the Union. Many are escaped slaves. Others were born free in the North. Some even come from the Caribbean. Often they're assigned to menial duties, paid less, poorly equipped, but they fight, and when they do, they prove their worth. One of the most famous stories is that of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, an all-black volunteer unit led by a white colonel, Robert Gould Shaw. In July 1863, they attack Fort Wagner in South Carolina. Many die, including Shaw, but their bravery forever changes how black soldiers are seen. But it all begins there, on that beach. Lee invades the North again. He marches into Pennsylvania, hoping for a decisive victory on enemy soil. The Union Army, now led by General George Meade, intercepts him near a small town, Gettysburg. For 3 days, from July 1st to July 3rd, one of the largest battles in American history unfolds. Over 50,000 casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. The climax comes on the 3rd day, with a massive Confederate charge known as Pickett's Charge. Thousands of Confederate troops cross an open field under heavy Union fire. They are cut down. Lee retreats. The Union holds. It's the end of the Confederate offensive. After Gettysburg, the tide turns. The South begins to lose the initiative. The North, still divided, still weary, now has a larger purpose: union and freedom. Lincoln visits Gettysburg months later to dedicate a military cemetery. There, he delivers one of the most iconic speeches in American history, the Gettysburg Address. A short speech, just 272 words, but profoundly powerful. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation. After Gettysburg, the Confederacy is on the defensive, but the South does not surrender, and the North understands that winning battles is no longer enough. To truly win, they must crush the system that fuels the rebellion. They need a new strategy. They need a new general. It's 1864. Lincoln appoints a quiet, determined, pragmatic man as commander of all Union forces, Ulysses S. Grant. He had led the victorious Mississippi campaign and captured Vicksburg, a key city for control of the river. He's a man of the West, a former farmer and failed businessman, reborn in the dust of war. Grant doesn't seek glory. He seeks victory. And he has a clear plan: strike everywhere without pause. No more waiting between campaigns. He intends to wear the South down, to exhaust it, to bring it to its knees. Meanwhile, another general rises in the Western theater, William Tecumseh Sherman. He conceives a new strategy: total war, destroying not just armies, but also resources, railroads, crops. He wants to break the South's will to fight. It's a harsh strategy, ruthless, but effective. Grant advances toward Richmond, the Confederate capital. He clashes with Robert E. Lee in a series of bloody battles: Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor. Each time, casualties are enormous, tens of thousands killed or wounded. Grant does not retreat. Ever. The press calls him the Butcher. Critics accuse him of senseless slaughter, but Grant knows exactly what he's doing. He's bleeding the Confederate army. An army with no replacements, no supplies. Meanwhile, in the South, Sherman is on the move. He sets out from Chattanooga, Tennessee, marching toward Atlanta, the industrial heart of the Confederacy. His troops burn bridges, tear up railroads, occupy towns. On September 2nd, 1864, Atlanta falls. It's a devastating blow to the South, but also a political turning point. In the middle of the war, the United States holds a presidential election. Lincoln runs for re-election, but his victory is far from guaranteed. The country is exhausted. The death toll is staggering. The Democrats, with General George McClellan as their candidate, promise immediate peace, even if it means letting the South go. Lincoln fears he'll lose. He even writes a letter pledging to cooperate with his successor to preserve the Union during the transition. But then, Atlanta falls, and public opinion shifts. In the election, Lincoln wins decisively. He receives 55% of the popular vote and dominates the Electoral College. It's a clear mandate: continue the war until victory. After Atlanta, Sherman begins his legendary march to the coast. He sets out with 62,000 men. They cover 300 miles in 40 days, across Georgia. No supply lines. They live off the land, taking what they find. They destroy bridges, roads, supply depots. Sherman fights no major battles, but he brings the war into the South's very heart. He wants to shatter not just its army, but its will to resist. On December 21st, 1864, Sherman enters Savannah. the city surrenders without a fight. The South is on its knees. Richmond is under siege. The cities are ruined. The economy has collapsed. The fields are burned. The railroads torn up. The armies cut in half. But the war is not over yet. Robert E. Lee still resists with the last remnants of his forces, and Lincoln is already looking ahead to Reconstruction, to ending slavery, to reuniting the Union not just by force, but with justice. It's early 1865. The South is exhausted. The war has dragged on for 4 years. Cities lie in ruins. Fields are burned. Families are shattered. Food supplies are running out. The Confederate Army is collapsing. They lack everything: weapons, ammunition, uniforms, shoes. Many soldiers desert. Some steal. Others die of hunger. On April 2, 1865, Union troops break through the defenses of Petersburg after a 10-month siege. It's the gateway to Richmond, the Confederate capital. That night, Jefferson Davis and his government flee by train. The city falls. Northern troops occupy it. The streets are in flames. Warehouses abandoned. 2 days later, Lincoln walks through the ruins of Richmond, on foot. A black man kneels before him to thank him. Lincoln stops him. "Stand up. There's no one here you need to kneel before." General Robert E. Lee, with the last Confederate Army, tries to escape west, but he's intercepted. On April 9, 1865, he accepts the inevitable. In a red brick house in Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, Lee meets with General Grant. The surrender is simple, dignified, without vengeance. Grant offers generous terms. Confederate soldiers may return home. They may keep their horses. They are given food rations. Lee simply says, "It's over." Grant replies, "The war is over. Now the work of peace begins." Five days later, the joy of victory is shattered. On April 14th, Abraham Lincoln goes to the theater with his wife. He's relaxed, laughing, speaking of peace, of rebuilding. He wants to reintegrate the southern states without revenge. He wants to give free black men the right to vote. That night, a man enters the presidential box and shoots him in the head. It's John Wilkes Booth, a famous actor and Southern sympathizer. Booth believes he's avenging the South, but he kills the only man capable of truly healing America. Lincoln dies the morning of April 15, 1865. News spreads fast. Newspapers rush out special editions. Church bells toll in mourning across the North. Thousands take to the streets, in silence. Lincoln's body is transported by train from Washington to Springfield, Illinois, a 13-day journey through 12 cities. Millions gather along the tracks to say goodbye. Just months later, Congress passes the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The text is simple, powerful. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, shall exist within the United States. Slavery is over, legally, formally. For the first time in history, millions of black people are no longer property. They are free. But being free is not the same as being equal. A new era begins. Reconstruction. An ambitious and fragile project. The goal is to reintegrate the southern states into the Union, to guarantee civil rights for freed blacks. Schools, courts, and community groups are created. Black men vote. Some are elected to office. They enter state legislatures. It's a unique moment. It feels like the beginning of a new America. But it doesn't last. In the South, many whites refuse to accept the new reality. Terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan emerge, attacking black people and white allies. Federal troops remain in the South to maintain order, but it's a fragile presence. In 1877, a political compromise ends Reconstruction. The troops are withdrawn. Southern governments return to conservative white hands. A long era begins of segregation, discrimination, and violence. The American Civil War claimed more than 620,000 lives. It destroyed cities, divided families, tore a nation apart. But it also forever changed what it means to be American. It ended slavery. It laid the, still fragile, foundations of possible equality. It transformed the Union from a pact between states into an indivisible nation. Lincoln's dream was not fully realized, but it lived on in struggles, in rights, in words. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. And that dream continues today.